The running back position is absolutely dropping like flies right now, you guys. There's guys on bye weeks. There's guys getting injured. A bunch of guys on IR. We're losing running backs fast, man. And we've got to make some very tough decisions heading into week 6 fantasy football. So today, we are getting into the top 30 running back rankings for week 6 fantasy football. And as always, at the end of every single ranking video, you will see my favorite underdog flex option of the week at each particular position. So today, we will have our underdog running back flex option of the week that is outside of the top 30 right here. I am filming this at midnight on Tuesday night, guys, and I just hit 5,000 subscribers last week, and I need your help to get to 6. So go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. It is greatly appreciated, guys. So let's go ahead and just dive right into the matchups right now. So obviously, in the first tier, you're going to see Christian McCaffrey, of course. Every single week, he's going to be number 1. I mean, he had a down game for his standards, and he's playing Cleveland on the road this week, so it's not like the matchup is actually great. And when you look at what he did last week against the Dallas Cowboys, it was actually not a very good game from Christian McCaffrey standards. Like, that was not his best game, but he still did get in the end zone, and that's the thing, is like, even in a down game, Christian McCaffrey is unbelievable. He's unbelievable. So it's like, I can't have him outside he cannot be anywhere else besides number 1 for me personally. 24.8 fantasy points per game. Dude runs for over 100 yards every single game. It's crazy. This guy is just ridiculously good. But I've got a second guy in Christian McCaffrey's tier this week, and it's Raheem Mostert of the Miami Dolphins. It's such a perfect storm. Not only is Devon Achane probably going on IR. Last time I heard, he's expected to go on IR. So he's gone for at least 4 weeks, right? They're getting Jeff Wilson back, but he's been on IR too. So he's not exactly a beacon of health right now. So you've got one running back who's healthy and fully functional right now, and that's Raheem Mostert. And they're playing the Carolina Panthers. Like, it's all lining up here for Raheem Mostert to have a massive week. So this is kind of one of the rare weeks to me where another running back belongs in the same tier as Christian McCaffrey, because he's going to handle the workload. He's going to be continuously being on an explosive offense like the Miami Dolphins. And with a matchup like this, I love Raheem Mostert this week. Dropping down a tier, I've got Bijan Robinson here. I love Bijan Robinson this week, and he's taking on the Washington Commanders. So here's a couple reasons I love Bijan this week. So when you look at what he did last week, disappointing. And really looking at his numbers on the screen, it's not like they're absolutely tremendous. 14.3 fantasy points per game. He's only getting around 13.5 attempts per game on the ground. Nothing super impressive here, but he is very efficient at 5.4 yards per carry. And the good part about this is Washington is bleeding points, and they're letting a lot of teams run on them. And really, I think what it comes down to is this is a game script that Atlanta can use Bijan Robinson 20 plus times. Last week, when you look at what happened versus Houston, Houston was stopping the run very well. Houston's got a good defense, though. Washington does not. Washington's defense is weak right now. So I think that this is a matchup that plays into Bijan's favor. I think he has a bounce back week this week. I'm very confident in Bijan in the top 3 right now. And in the same tier, of course, you're going to have Austin Eckler probably making his triumphant return this week against the Dallas Cowboys. So obviously, from a matchup perspective, it's not great, right? Like, you're talking about a running back who's going up against the Dallas Cowboys defense, especially after they're coming off a loss. Dallas is going to be pissed off and ready to go in this game, I think. Here's the thing about Austin Eckler, though. He's in the same tier as Christian McCaffrey most weeks. And the reason is because this guy is just matchup proof. I mean, he's just too important to the offense. And now, especially without Mike Williams, who, by the way, if you remember last year, when the Chargers were missing both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen at times, Austin Eckler's targets went through the roof. That's what's going to happen again here with Austin Eckler. So even if he doesn't handle 14 carries, 15 carries, he's going to get at least 6 or 7 targets in this game. And a 99% Austin Eckler, he absolutely still belongs in the top 5 here. I'm confident having him here. Tony Pollard, same matchup. I think he rebounds. Tony Pollard, last 2 weeks really, hasn't been great in fantasy football. And I actually included Tony Pollard in my buy low trade target video before week 6 fantasy football. So I'm all in on Tony Pollard because the past 2 weeks have not been good for Pollard, but this is a matchup to take advantage of. The Los Angeles Chargers defense is just simply not very good. They're not a very good defense right here. Tony Pollard's dealt with some pretty good defenses lately. Like he faced the San Francisco 49ers obviously last week, and then he faced New England right before they had all their injuries. So to me, Tony Pollard is in perfect position for a bounce back. I think they will be able to run on the Chargers. Chargers do not have a very good defense. And I think this is a matchup that Tony Pollard is going to take advantage of and have a very, very nice bounce back game. And for those of you who traded for him, make sure to start him this week for sure. At number 6 here, probably going to seem pretty high, but I've got Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs, and they're taking on the Denver Broncos on Thursday night. So Isaiah Pacheco to me has been, when you look at the numbers on the screen, the guy has been great this year. 13.2 fantasy points per game. He's got 3 rushing touchdowns over the past 3 weeks. There's multiple layers to why he's being great right now. Because number 1, he's on an elite offense. Kansas City's hitting their stride, and really Isaiah Pacheco is the second most important weapon on this offense. He's vital to this offense. So that workload he's getting is not going away. And then obviously number 2 is because Denver's defense sucks. They freaking suck. They just gave up like 30 points to Bree Hall. And by the way, I think Bree Hall's a much better player than Isaiah Pacheco is. But Bree Hall's not on the offense that Isaiah Pacheco's on. So I think Isaiah Pacheco could have just as good of a week. Maybe not quite as good, but Isaiah Pacheco to me, easy top 10 running back this week. Number 7, Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Indianapolis Colts. Travis Etienne, my guy, was shouting about him all offseason, saying that he was going to be a league-winning type of player. It's coming to fruition a little bit here. Travis Etienne averaging 16.6 fantasy points per game. He's averaging over 20 opportunities and 20 touches per game. So yeah, the fear of Tank Bigsby, that should be long gone. And I said that from the beginning of the offseason. It's pretty evident now that that's not there. But Travis Etienne, great week last week. I think he's just set up for success again. Indianapolis' defense is not as good as I had thought, as I had ranked Indianapolis inside my top 10 defenses on my videos the past 2 weeks. That's not going to happen again this week. Just so you guys know, I love Travis Etienne this week. Number 8, Kenneth Walker, taking on the Cincinnati Bengals this week. Listen, Kenneth Walker, I think a lot of people forgot about him over the bye because I've got a lot of Kenneth Walker questions this week. Should I trade Kenneth Walker for X player, right? And I'm saying consistently to everybody. And if you got a comment from me, just take solace in the fact that I'm holding ground and saying keep Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker has been great in fantasy football this year. 17.4 fantasy points per game, 16 rush attempts, 5 rushing touchdowns. Now that number's a little volatile, obviously, and we can't always count on that. But against the Cincinnati defense that has not exactly been strong this year, I don't have issues with Seattle right now and Kenneth Walker. I think that their offense and their team as a whole is looking very good. So I'm really big on Kenneth Walker, not only this week, but really for most of the season, he's going to be inside the top 10. Number 9, David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions, taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa this week. So there's a couple layers to this one. So obviously, David Montgomery is, like I said in the offseason, clearly the running back 1 at this point. There's no question about that. Number 2 is that this is not an ideal matchup. Tampa Bay's defense is really strong. They've taken the ball away a lot, but the thing is that Detroit's offense is honestly elite. Their offense is very, very good. And I think that David Montgomery, he's getting more efficient. You could see it on the screen, 4.2 yards per carry. He's averaging over 20 touches per game. 19.6 fantasy points per game. He's just been great. He's been absolutely fantastic in fantasy football. That's just David Montgomery's reality right now. So as far as I'm concerned, David Montgomery has to continue to be in the top 10. Number 10, Kyren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams, taking on the Arizona Cardinals, going for the Kyren Williams bounce back this week. Listen, he's had 2 stinker games now, and the results of it is really because he doesn't get in the end zone. Because we do have to address with Kyren Williams, and this is why I've been calling him a sell high guy. He's not very efficient. 3.9 yards per carry. That's the problem here, is if not only if he doesn't get the volume, But if he doesn't find the end zone, it's a problem. This week, I think he finds the end zone. Arizona Cardinals are not great defensively. They're a very good effort team, but they're just not as talented as most of the teams they're playing. I think that's going to fall in line here with Kyren Williams' week this week. Number 11. Honestly shocked to have him this high this early. I've got Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints taking on the Houston Texans in Houston this week. So I don't love the matchup. I'll come right out here and say that. Houston has definitely been tough against opponents' running games. But Alvin Kamara has looked great, and not only has he looked great, but he's so clearly the lead back in this offense. It's not close. I mean, he's already averaging over 20 touches per game through 2 games played, 16.1 fantasy points per game. This guy has just been excellent so far. So, I mean, you look at it, and he's averaging 4 yards a carry, and he's averaging over 8 receptions per game. It's crazy. It's honestly crazy to me. But feel very good if you have Alvin Kamara right now. He should not be on your bench right now, especially in a matchup where I do think that New Orleans is going to have to check the ball down because their quarterback is not healthy. Derek Carr is not a healthy guy right now. So he's going to continue to have to check the ball down. I continue to love Alvin Kamara in fantasy right now. Josh Jacobs at number 12, taking on the New England Patriots in Las Vegas this week. So used to be at the beginning of the year, I would have been pretty weary of this type of matchup against the New England Patriots. The problem is their defense is not good. Their team is not good. And Josh Jacobs has been looking better. He hasn't been looking great. He still is not averaging 3 yards a carry on the season. And the last 2 games, he's still under 4 yards per carry. But Josh Jacobs is looking better. He's finally scored. I mean, Josh Jacobs is definitely in a situation where I think that he's going to continue to get better as the weeks go on. So I don't have a problem with Josh Jacobs. I don't love it. And I do worry that if he doesn't find the end zone, he might revert back to what we've seen. But this is a matchup that New England's reeling as a team right now. I think Las Vegas can take advantage. Number 13, DeAndre Swift of the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the New York Jets in Philadelphia this week. Look, DeAndre Swift, when you see the numbers on the screen, he's just so efficient. And this is to be expected. Before the start of the season, I came out with a draft strategy video explaining why going after running backs with top-tier offensive lines is the move. And it is the move. 5.7 yards per carry, and this guy's averaging 14.1 fantasy points per game. And by the way, that's also with an active week 1 where he only got 2 touches. So he's been great in fantasy football. Now he's the starter. He's getting most of the work out of the backfield. DeAndre Swift, to me, even with the Jets matchup that's pretty tough, Philadelphia is just dominant. They're dominant. Their offensive line is dominant. I expect DeAndre Swift to continue to put up good games. Number 14, Saquon Barkley. I'm sure it feels low, but they're taking on the Buffalo Bills. And there's multiple reasons why. Buffalo's defense is obviously very good. Now, the problem with Buffalo's defense is that they have suffered a lot of injuries, so they could potentially be weak. But if there's a team that's going to take advantage of them, it's not going to be the New York Giants. It's just not going to be. The New York Giants are atrocious offensively. They're absolutely embarrassingly, laughingly bad. So, even though Saquon Barkley is a great player, and he's going to be the entire offense basically when he gets back, how high is the ceiling really? For a guy that everybody knows who plays him, we got to stop this guy, and Daniel Jones is not a threat. That's the problem that the Giants are going to face. And especially against a great team, it's not going to go well. And I do think that in Saquon's first week back, barring a setback that he doesn't come back for, I think that Saquon Barkley will struggle to his standards in this first week back. Number 15, James Cook, same matchup here. Look, James Cook, I know a lot of people who are looking to sell him. I know a lot of people who are looking to buy him. I'm looking to buy him personally. I think James Cook is still a very good fantasy option. I mean, obviously, Buffalo's offense is still not geared towards the running game, but he has helped Buffalo find some running balance here. I mean, he's still averaging over 11 fantasy points per game, and this is a matchup that's perfect. I mean, the Giants, as opposed to being on the other side of this matchup, the Giants' defense is the perfect defense to go up against, and that's really just the simple reality of why James Cook is in the top 15 this week. Derrick Henry at number 16. This is probably, I mean, it just sucks, honestly, taking on the Baltimore Ravens. The reason it sucks is because we're seeing a legend of the previous 5 years being sent out to pasture a little bit. It's kind of what's happening right now. Because here's the ultimate problem with Derrick Henry, is if he doesn't get the volume, he's not going to be worth playing. I mean, he's going to be worth playing, but he's not going to be worth that much in fantasy football as much as we're used to. So, because you're seeing 12.7 fantasy points per game and 3.8 yards per carry. It's just not very good numbers there. Derrick Henry's a volume guy at this point, and he's not getting the volume right now. He had 13 carries last week. It's not good enough. If he's not getting at least 20 carries, it's not going to be a lot of good weeks for Derrick Henry. And against the Baltimore defense that is not easy to run on, there's a lot of problems here with Derrick Henry. Although he still is a must start, it's not looking good. He's a descending asset at this point. Number 17, Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders, taking on the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta this week. So Brian Robinson has been hot and cold, right? Like, those of you with Brian Robinson, I've also got a lot of questions about this, is that what should we do with Brian Robinson? Are we buying him? Are we selling him? Are we holding him? Here's what I'll tell you about this. Brian Robinson has been good in spots. Obviously, 13.3 fantasy points per game, and he's had 4 touchdowns through 5 weeks. So, like, he's not been a bad play in fantasy football whatsoever. The problem that I have with Brian Robinson is that he's looked at as the running back one of this offense. Well, look at the attempts per game. He's not even averaging 15 rushes per game, and he's not even averaging 15 touches per game. So if Brian Robinson doesn't get the volume, it's not like he's that efficient of a guy. So where's the upside, really? And I think Atlanta is a good matchup for him. But Brian Robinson, I've always had issues with in fantasy football, and a lot of people give me pushback for it. I think Brian Robinson's fine. He's about middle of the pack for me, but I'm not excited to start Brian Robinson. I just think this week is going to be better than last week for sure. Number 18, we've got Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know, Jonathan Taylor over Zach Moss, the legend who just ran all over the Tennessee Titans this past week. So I really think that Jonathan Taylor, my thing with him is that before last week, I came into the week saying it's not going to be a situation where Jonathan Taylor's going to get 20 touches again. Like, he's not coming right into this offense and taking 20 touches. And hindsight's always 20/20. But when you look back at Jonathan Taylor's situation, he missed a lot of offseason. He missed all of training camp, and he just came back to the team. Literally on Saturday was when he signed his contract. Like, do we really expect him to get 20 plus touches? No, of course not. So he ends up with 6 carries and he only ends up averaging 3 yards per carry. That's understandable. But now he's got another week back. And I do think that Zach Moss will be involved this week, but I do think that we will see at least 10 to 12 touches this week for Jonathan Taylor. And to me personally, if this workload evens out to where Jonathan Taylor gets 12 touches and Zach Moss gets 14 touches, I'm taking Jonathan Taylor because I know the upside is there. Now, granted, of course, there's going to be some issues there, as I have stated with Josh Jacobs. When you don't practice with your team and you're not on the field during preseason, your body's not used to getting hit. So you're going to have to get adjusted and acclimated to getting hit again. But Jonathan Taylor, to me, is just a higher upside player than Zach Moss. And I know it sounds crazy to say after the performance he's given a couple times this year. I'm taking Jonathan Taylor, though, and I feel pretty good about doing it. Number 19, Alexander Madison, taking on the Chicago Bears this week. Listen, Alexander Madison is like one of the hardest guys to rank for me every single week. A lot of times, I don't even want to rank him. And then sometimes, like this week is a good example, I considered putting him at like top 15 range. I elected not to do it because the volume just is not consistently there. This is a pass-first team all the way around. But here's the good things about Alexander Madison this week. He's coming into a week where Justin Jefferson is gone, so they may rely more on him in the run or out of the backfield in the pass game, and the matchup is good. Chicago's defense is not very good. Now, they stopped Brian Robinson last week. Minnesota's got a better offense than Washington does. So I could see a world where Alexander Madison does have a good week. I'm just not confident because I know the workload is not consistent, and I know he's just not a consistent player either. Number 20, Joe Mixon, taking on the Seattle Seahawks this week. I think the best way that you could say Joe Mixon's performing is just underwhelming. It's just underwhelming right now. 10.7 fantasy points per game, less than 4 yards per carry, less than 70 rushing yards. I mean, he hasn't been bad, but he's not been great at all. So Seattle's defense is not exactly the best matchup, But Cincinnati's offense, I will say, if they can build off the momentum that they just built against Arizona, it's going to get better for Joe Mixon as well. So Joe Mixon, I think he's fine here at number 20. I feel comfortable. Don't feel great about him. Don't feel bad about him. Pretty neutral feeling about Joe Mixon right now. 21, I've got Ramondre Stevenson taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. Listen, Ramondre Stevenson has had a rough go of it. And that's a guy that I liked in the offseason heading into the year. But what I have said over the past several weeks, though, is that I think this is the week where he starts to bring it back. I think he starts to rebound. The opponents that they've faced have been brutal. They've had a brutal schedule. I think that this is a week where Ramondre Stevenson can kind of get right. I mean, he's still handling the majority of the touches out of the backfield. He hasn't been efficient at all doing it. But again, opponents matter. And this opponent is not strong against the run. A.J. Dillon just ran all over this team last week. And A.J. Dillon's not that good of a player. He's just not. So I think Ramondre Stevenson could have a get-right game. Proceed with caution since he has been so bad, but I do think that there is a good shot Ramondre Stevenson has a good game this week and gets back into the end zone. Number 22, Damen Pierce of the Houston Texans taking on the New Orleans Saints. Multiple layers to this one. New Orleans defense is not ideal for a running back, and Damen Pierce has not been good. He has only found the end zone one time, and he's only averaging 8.7 fantasy points per game. What I'm encouraged about with Damen Pierce is the past 2 weeks, he has handled 20 plus carries. That's a good sign. That shows you that this team wants to ride Damen Pierce, and he has looked better over the last 2 weeks. I think Houston's offense is starting to find a groove here. So I do think that Damen Pierce is someone to watch over the next several weeks. Not a great matchup, but I do think Damen Pierce possibly could be on the rise right now. 23, Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. Obviously taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and obviously everybody's annoyed with Jahmyr Gibbs right now. Like, not only has he been not good, but obviously he missed last week as well. So Jahmyr Gibbs has been a massive disappointment this year for sure. I said it last week in my buy low video. I said I think that he's going to get a touchdown here soon. He's just in too good of an offense, and he still is involved. He's still averaging 13 opportunities per game. He's too efficient, and he's too explosive, and I think this offense will find a way to get in the end zone. So I'm never going to have Jahmyr Gibbs outside of my top 30 unless he becomes just a way worse player or unless he's injured. Number 24, now we've got Zach Moss. Zach Moss here at number 24 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Like I said, great week last week. Looking at his numbers right now, unbelievable. 20.4 fantasy points per game. Over 22 carries per game. 5 yards a carry. Zach Moss has been great. There's no doubt about it. But like I said with Jonathan Taylor, I think Jonathan Taylor gets way more touches this week than he did last week. Listen, here's something I didn't touch on earlier, but facing reality of this situation, it's very similar to David Montgomery's, which is that Jonathan Taylor just got signed to a $42 million deal with over half of the value of the contract guaranteed. They're not just going to stick him on the bench. They're just not going to do it. So Zach Moss, even though he's been good, he's not going to be the lead back forever. And even if, like I said earlier, even if Zach Moss gets 14 carries and Jonathan Taylor gets 12 carries, I'm taking Jonathan Taylor over Zach Moss because, first of all, the matchup's not great. And second of all, I think Jonathan Taylor is a better player once he gets going. Number 25, Rashad White in that matchup versus Detroit. Listen, Detroit's defense is real. Detroit's defense is for real. And they're not going to take this matchup lightly against the Buccaneers, who have been surprisingly good. So, Rashad White, the problem with him is if he's not getting in the end zone, he's really not that great in fantasy football. I know he's had a couple good games, but look at the touches he's getting. Almost 20 touches per game, and he's only averaging 3.3 yards per carry. There's a clear answer here of when Rashad White's good, and it's touchdown-based. And I can't rank a touchdown-based player inside of my top 20. I just can't do it. Unless the matchup's stupid good, and the matchup is not stupid good. 26, Bree Hall taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. I get it. It sucks. I have to put him this low, though. I do. The matchup sucks. The matchup last week, excellent. Best they've had all season. And he was great because he's a great player. And that's why it sucks for me to have to put him down this low. But we can't be fooled by this. The Jets' offense still sucks. It does. They played Denver, and they played them well because Denver's defense sucks. And Zach Wilson played way over his head against Kansas City. Bree Hall is great. Love the player. Depresses me that I have to rank him and Garrett Wilson consistently low, but that's just something we have to do, especially against the Philadelphia Eagles. 27, Jerome Ford of the Cleveland Browns taking on the San Francisco 49ers. This one probably feels low. When you look at Jerome Ford's numbers, very, very serviceable. 12.3 fantasy points per game, and that's also including the games where he was a backup to Nick Chubb. So, I mean, it's not like he's just been some bad player. He's been good in fantasy football for the most part. But here's what I've been saying for weeks now. If you take out that game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he's averaging less than 3 yards per carry. He's not a very efficient guy. And this isn't a matchup to take advantage of. San Francisco, they're going to clamp down on Cleveland's run game. They're not going to let Jerome Ford beat them. So I think it's a bad matchup. I don't think we've seen enough from Jerome Ford against anybody else besides the Steelers that's been that positive. He's gotten a lot of luck because he's gotten a couple touchdowns so far, and that's not predictable, especially against a defense that is very, very elite. Number 28, Javante Williams. He's coming back this week, and the Broncos are taking on the Chiefs. So he's got to be low because he's obviously coming off an injury and because the matchup is not good. They're going to fall down early, and they're not going to run much, and Denver doesn't run that much anyways. They don't. Look at the number of carries he has per game. Less than 10 carries per game. Denver doesn't run the ball. They don't stick to the run game. They just don't. So Javante Williams' ceiling, unfortunately, is not as high as I thought it was coming into the year. 29-30. They're back-to-back here because I don't know what to do with them. One of them will be inside here, and one of them might not be. Because Roshan Johnson and Diont Foreman are back-to-back here as they take on a very bad Minnesota Vikings defense. Listen, the matchup is great, and Chicago's starting to roll a little bit offensively. So I can definitely feel good about having one of these guys. I prefer Roshan Johnson, of course, because he's looked better. He's got basically 5 yards carry. Roshan Johnson has looked good in his opportunities, but he's in concussion protocol. Does he play? I don't know. I'm leaning on the side of maybe because they had a Thursday night game last week. So he's got extra time to recover. But we'll have to see. If he doesn't go, Diont Foreman is a viable start, though. Diont Foreman has been known to step in very well over the past several years for every team he's been on. So I think the matchup is just good enough here for both these guys to be inside the top 30 because one of them is going to eat. And now, as promised, my favorite Underdog Flex running back of the week this week. And I'll be honest here, I wanted to put him on this list right here. Do you remember him? It's Tyler Algier of the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Washington Commanders this week. So during the beginning of the season, like the first 2 weeks, I was saying Tyler Algier is actually a legit option that you could play right now. Then that was back when he was getting 20 touches a game, 17 touches a game, 15 touches a game. He was a legit option in fantasy football for a couple weeks. Now, obviously, past several weeks, wasn't getting as many touches, and he's clearly not a better running back than Bijan Robinson. Not even close. But did you know that he handled 17 carries last week? That is something to note here. And Washington's defense is not good. And I think this is a game script that they will run the ball a lot against the Washington Commanders. I think the game script adds up here. I think that what I saw last week from Algier's workload is encouraging. I've got him as my underdog running back option of the week, and I feel pretty good about this one. So let me know what you think of the running back rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered before Week 6 fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings for Week 6 fantasy football, click on this video right here.